All right, guys. I know we're y'all are a little bit bummed. I'm bummed. Had some computer issues, so I've reset everything up on my phone. Uh, while we're waiting people to get in here, unfortunately, on my phone won't be able to show any good photos or anything, but we still have great audio and great video with Mr. Vern today. So it's we okay, good. We've already got some people in. Guys, I'm sorry. I'm glad we've got it going on this side. But here is Mr. Vern. Without further ado, we're gonna let him take over and share a little bit about how he got into SOG. Mr. Vern, you ready?
You still there?
Yes, sir. You ready?
Yes.
You can go ahead. The floor is yours, sir.
I enlisted in the Army in 1966. Went to basic and AIT. Went to OCS. After OCS, obviously, then I went to jump school and was selected for Special Forces and went through the Q course and initially was assigned to 7th Special Forces Group at Fort Bragg. My initial formation in 7th Special Forces Group was an eye-opener for me because we didn't have battalions then, we had companies, and I was in Delta Company. Most of the company consisted of ex-bates and base veterans, a lot of whom were very unproficient in English. So a lot of times instruction sergeant major in formation would be translated while he was talking. And from there, I was selected to go to a course at Fort Holabird, which Fort Holabird doesn't exist then, but that was the intelligence school called the Special Forces Officers Operations and Intelligence Course. And after completing that school, I received orders for Vietnam and was assigned to CNC, which obviously was a part of MACV-SOG. When I arrived in country, I was assigned to the FOB at Khe Sanh, and then after we closed Khe Sanh, we established the launch site at MAI, and I was at MAI until we closed, and then we moved to FOB1 for a short time, and then I was, along with several other people, was sent to CCC at Khe After about 6 months at Khe I PCS back in country, and unfortunately was given the same set of orders I tried to get out of by extending the first time, and was sent back to the Ranger Department at Fort Benning as an instructor, which were the only 2 years of my career that I was outside of Special Forces.
Wow. Okay. Let me see here. I'm still getting you. Oh no. There we go. I'm still getting used to using this phone. Sorry about that. You mentioned your first tour when you were with CNC. Were you besides MyLock, didn't you also spend time at Khe Sanh early on?
Yes, that was the initial FOB I went to.
Okay. No, I mean, along with MyLock, I mean, not much is spoken very much about the Saw guys there at Khe Sanh. Can you speak a little bit about? I know Mr. Bob Donahue as well was around there around that time. Can you speak a little bit about what it was like running missions out of Khe Sanh?
Well, it was a little bit different because we actually were kind of an appendage off the main Marine compound, and obviously being a top secret, no foreign operation, The Marines had no idea what we were doing, especially with the Montagnards, and we obviously operated very differently than they did. By the time I got there, the primary siege had basically been broken, and we would receive intermittent incoming, which had a tendency to disrupt activities for the period of time that it went on. But other than that, we were launching and recovering into and out of Khe Sanh on a fairly regular basis.
Wow. Okay. I'm sure that is gonna come up, but we've already got some questions coming in. If you wouldn't mind taking some already.
Sure.
What prompted you to join the Army in '66? Did you expect to be drafted, or were you just eager to be involved in the conflict?
Well, actually, my father had spent 34 years in the Army. So I grew up as an Army brat all over the world. And I started college, and at the end of the first year, just decided that I was going to go into the Army. And so I enlisted Infantry Airborne with the intention of going to Special Forces.
Wow. There's another interesting tidbit. You were actually going to college down here in my neck of the woods, so to speak, Alabama.
Yes.
That's another little interesting bit. Roll Tide for any of y'all Alabama fans out there. Did you know Pat Watkins? Was Pat Watkins at Khe Sanh when you were?
Pat Watkins was there, and at also that at Da Nang, where he was flying as a Covey rider. Pat, we didn't talk about Pat Watkins. We just talked about Mandolin.
Yes, sir.
Call sign.
Wow. And he
overhead my Covey rider on a couple of operations.
Of him and Don Walken were on a few. They were not only amazing recon men, but just outstanding cover riders. I mean, outstanding from what I've heard. Of course, I wasn't there.
Yeah, we had every one of the Covey riders were just phenomenal guys. They wouldn't have been in the Covey if they hadn't been. And they all were very experienced and knew exactly what was going on the ground. So that just was an added asset that you had to rely on.
Absolutely.
That someone who hadn't been on the ground would not have been able to find.
Wow. It's and that like you said, that's it's usually some of the most experienced 1-0s that had put their time in and knew exactly what to look for and what was going on, and they definitely had some really good Covey riders throughout the years.
I'm not Pat was later, much later, several years ago here at Eglin, was awarded DSC for his actions on August 23rd, and CCN got overrun.
Wow. I've got a few photos I've shared of that. I know some of y'all were there. Mr. Lou was there, and a few others. And what an honor that must have been to finally be recognized for that. That was a terrible night. How soon? I'll get your question, Alex. How soon were you around CCN at that time, or?
I was at MAI, and Major Sincere and I had flown down because there was a commanders conference at CCN on that day, and the NCOs were brought in because there was a promotion board going to be held the next day. And Major Sincere and I left late that evening and went back to MAI on a King Bee and several of our people were there when it went down that night.
Wow. How did you did y'all go back, or were y'all sent it excuse me, were y'all sent as a relief force after the fact, or?
We were alerted to get a hatchet force ready to go in, but we never went in back in. No.
Gosh, wow. We've got a few good questions coming in. How did the public view the war in 1966 when you joined?
In 1966, you didn't have all the anti-war sentiment being broadcast daily over the media. You didn't have all the anti-war movement going on. That didn't become fashionable until a couple of years later. But in 1966, I think the majority of the public at large, in general, supported the war because they saw that as another, just another one of the proxy wars against the Soviet Union and the communist bloc at the time. And people need to remember that at that time we were at war, even though it was an undeclared war, pretty much everywhere that the Soviets were attempting to make inroads in with governments. We were in the same place at the same time. Central and South America, prime example, Africa, Southeast Asia. And I think the majority of the American populace saw this as just another proxy war against communism.
Wow. And it's, I mean, it's an amazing how quick it went from 66 to it really not being a mainstream thing to be a anti-war protester and such. And by 68 and 69, it was just out of control, full blown, just craziness.
Well, I really think the media blew that up out of proportion too. I think mainstream America still supported the troops and the war because they understood the purpose of the war. You know, the domino theory was in effect at the time. And the theory was that if Vietnam felt an illusion of support, that may not, in fact, be reality.
I can agree. It was really the West Coast and some of in New York and stuff like that really got all the loud. What is it? That saying, the less numbers have the loudest voices currently, something to that nature.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much like you were saying. Everyone I've ever spoken to, and especially around here or the Midwest, they never saw hippies and stuff like that protesting or anything around here. That wouldn't have flown. I can tell you that right off the bat.
Yep.
How did you already know about SF by then?
Like I said, my father spent 34 years in the Army, so he was a veteran of World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. So, but he was there early on prior to this.
Wow. Okay. Oh, there's another interesting. When did you first hear about SOG? Did you know what it was before you ended up joining?
Yes and no. No one, even the guys in fifth group, because we were top secret operation. There were lots of rumors that floated around, but no one ever confirmed those rumors. I mean, at times there were actually operations within SOG that were not common knowledge throughout the rest of SOG.
Wow. Yeah. Y'all's compartmentalization was on a whole different level. That's amazing stuff hearing about. I mean, the ground guys didn't know what the air program was doing, or the psychological operations program didn't know what they were doing. It just amazing compartmentalization.
and you were pretty pretty well convinced that those non-disclosure statements you had signed were going to, if you didn't abide by them. So
let's see here. Did you want to be part of SOG or just any SF, Green Beret or Ranger or anything else?
actually, I really did want to be part of SOG.
Wow.
I would have been extremely happy to be with any SF assignment, but I wanted to be part of SOG.
Wow, that's amazing that that there were guys like you out there wanting to get in it, especially when you get that first briefing of how dangerous and everything like that. It's amazing. This is a pretty good question. What were typical operations for SOG personnel of FOB3 during the Khe Sanh siege?
Pretty much the same as every other FOB was running at the time. There were not a lot of large scale hatchet force operations. It was primarily at that time we would call spike teams, not recon teams, but the spike teams being deployed in and out. There was during that early period in early '68. The NVA had not developed the effectiveness of their countermeasures against us, and some of those operations were able to do a little bit more successfully because they really didn't have an organized element that was solely dedicated to denying SOG operations. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Eventually, we learned that they had actually formed a unit specifically to counter SOG missions.
Wow. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
We learned that after the war was over. Now we.
Wow, I mean, some of the I mean, the Marines, they were known during the siege and all that, but I mean, I can't imagine what what y'all were going through. And hearing some of what Pat spoke about on his Sogcast visit was interesting, with the movement of the tanks and the personnel and all that was just astounding to hear about. What was your role when you first experienced combat with SOG?
As was normal in SOG, I was a 1-2 strap hanger on John Smith's team on my first mission. Right after I got to Khe Sanh, I think 3 days after I got to Khe Sanh, I ran my first ST mission with them. I ran 3 missions out of Khe Sanh with Smitty.
And I haven't seen it come up.
Title there, I was the assistant operations officer.
Okay, that's what I was wondering about as well. I haven't seen the question come up, but I'm sure it will. But I'll go ahead and ask because I've been asked about it. Did the STs at Khe Sanh and at MAI, did y'all have team names, or because I've not been able to find, but maybe 1 or 2 mentioned team names out of both of those FOB.
Sometimes operations. Once we got to MAI, in addition to kind of an additional duty, I had trained in HF. We actually ran a couple of missions out of MAI. I did with just they were RT missions or snatch missions with just selected members of the Hatchet Force. So sometimes you had kind of an ad hoc ST, so it had no name.
Wow. Okay. That's been I've noticed. I think St. Bear. I think Pat and Lou were Lion, and I've really not seen any of my lock. To be honest, I know a few teams were there before launching, but none of the my lock teams had that I could find.
We had HS at MyLock primarily, and we had some teams that would come in and be there temporarily, and then we had some teams obviously that were there only for launch.
Okay. Okay. This is a very interesting question. While public perception of the war is often analyzed from the perspective of U.S. civilians, how did the average Vietnamese feel about the U.S. presence, and how staunch was their opposition to the North? I'm assuming, in your opinion, he's meaning.
From what I saw, obviously knowing the history of how the war evolved from the establishment of the DMZ and Eisenhower's refusal to let nationwide elections take place, it created an us and them scenario. Those people who understood what communism was obviously opposed it, but like most populations in most countries, the majority of the people in the countryside really and truly did not have any political opinion one way or another. They simply wanted to continue to exist as they had and not get shot.
Wow.
Sometimes some of the Vietnamese army elements, what I saw, were very good and very professional. But after you fighting a war for 10 or 12 years, in some cases 20 years, some of them start becoming more survival oriented than mission oriented.
Yeah, and I mean, some of the it progressively, sadly, got worse and worse, and especially with the Vietnamization and that process. And I can only imagine how the average Vietnamese citizen felt when they were seeing their army just literally fall apart in front of them like that.
Well, kind of pull the rug out from under them.
Yeah, yes, sir. Yes, sir. I mean, I know in some of the groups y'all were with, and some of the other conventional conventional A teams, or ODAs, whatever they were A teams at that time. I know some of them still had good CIDG troops and all of that, but it seems like you get those horror stories of the LLDB guys and some of the Ranger units that weren't fully trained or associated with American advisors, or just horror stories coming out of there.
Yep.
This will be, I don't think I've ever asked you this. Just wondering if Mr. Ward or Bud knew of Larry Thorne. I've heard of Larry. I did not know him. Mr. Ward might have something more interesting to add.
I did not know Larry Thorne. He actually was KIA before I got there. However, he and Clyde Sincere were, I know, were teammates in the 10th. Obviously, Clyde Sincere was on the original morning report for Special Forces. He was truly one of the originals from day one. And he and Larry Thorne were together, I'm pretty sure, in the 10th group.
Wow. And these are actually some good questions, and I'll be anxious to get to ask you some about some of your legendary missions. Here's an interesting one about another individual. Did you ever cross paths with Jerry Shriver?
Personally, no.
No.
No, I never. He was down south, and I was up north until later in '69.
Yes, sir. One interesting thing I need to remind that I need to put a note next to. We need to speak about Dewey Canyon. That's some very interesting stuff that you were sharing with me. Guys, bear with me. I'm not used to my phone and getting these questions, so y'all just bear with me. I apologize. Here we go. What was the opinion or level of regard members of MACV-SOG held towards the enemy? Were members of the PLF, in parentheses Viet Cong, considered to be competent fighters and tangible threats? And what of the regular NVA / People's Army of Vietnam?
We very seldom, if ever, had any contact with the actual Viet Cong.
Mm-hmm.
Nearly all of our contact was with the NVA, and the NVA were very competent soldiers. They were very good at what they did, and obviously, depending on the level of the soldier or the unit of assignment of the soldier, their infantry soldiers were really good. Their support elements were maybe not quite as well versed in combat operations, but they at least did their job well. But yeah, we had a lot of respect for the North Vietnamese Army.
I think this may pop up in just a second. He may have added on to his question. Did y'all happen to ever come across any Pathet Lao troops?
I never did personally, and I don't really recall ever hearing of anyone else coming in contact with them. I think they were a little bit further into the interior of Laos, and possibly mostly concentrated more to the north.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Oh, this is an interesting question. I think you actually did know. Was Mr. John McGovern at FOB3 when you were? If so, I'd love to hear a little bit about him if you know him.
To be perfectly honest with you, I'm not certain. I really and truly, in today's time, my memory is about as sharp as a bowling ball on something. Sometimes names don't really register that well.
Jason, I'll get some photos to Vern, and he'll definitely be able to recognize him because Tim Schaff was around during these times, and we'll find out for you. Wow, these are some great questions coming in. Did you happen to notice any heightened racial tensions between the U.S. servicemen, and were relations between the ARVN and U.S. servicemen susceptible to bleed over racism held towards the North Vietnamese combatants? That's a big one.
Racial tension between the U.S. and the Vietnamese?
I believe the first one he was getting in. It's a two-parter, I believe. I believe the first one was, did you notice any racial issues between U.S. servicemen? And then did y'all happen to have any bleed over hatred from the NVA that would be put on the South Vietnamese?
Truthfully, in my experience, race has nothing to do with being a soldier. I mean, it's irrelevant to you whether you're whatever race. You're a soldier. You're judged on your competence and not your skin color or your eye shape or
religion.
it's just that's never been a player in any unit I've ever been in or around. I have never seen that.
I believe that's another issue that Hollywood's really cooked up to make it a lot worse than it was.
I think that's a very astute comment. I think the media once again has tried to sensationalize things and create diversity where it doesn't belong or didn't exist. But it definitely didn't exist in our element.
That's what I was thinking. And you got to remember, Vern was special forces, and that may have happened. And of course, there were incidents in leg units and grunt units and the like. But the SF men were like he said, color, religion, none of that came into play with any of these men. They were of a total different mindset. But great question though. Great question. Does any there's going to be several, but I'll be anxious for him to get into this. Does any one mission that stands out more than others of a time where you felt that the enemy was just too close and fighting back to where you couldn't make it back to the FOB?
Yeah, there were several.
Yeah.
There actually were several times where you didn't actually formulate that thought in your head. It was kind of a realization that you came to after the fact. During the operation, not so much, but afterward, sometimes some soul searching on. You realized how close you were not to being back. But you're kind of task saturated whenever you're actually on the ground.
Yeah. One of the and maybe we can, after some of the questions die down, we can get into a little more of specifics about one of those that Mr. Rogers spoke about. In particular, I mean, you got two of them that really were the 3 POW missions, and then your mirror mission are just hair raising beyond all belief. And I can answer that, but yes, were there any black SOG members?
Oh yes.
Mm-hmm. Oh yes, there were. As a matter of fact, there were recon men, hatchet force men, officers. That they ran the gambit.
Yep. There were. I'm trying to think at MAI. There were several at MAI. I don't know if I sent you any pictures of. I think I sent you a couple of pictures. I don't know if I sent you one of Big John or not, but yeah, there were several.
I'll get Otto. I'll get some of those photos up on the page and all of that. And at CCC, especially, there were quite a few outstanding African American SOG men. Larry Nixon being one from RT New York that ran with Ed Walkoff. There were quite a few. Yep. Wow. Mr. Terry, I'm about to get your question. This is a good one too, though. Did you adjust your combat gear / loadout between running recon versus your hatchet operations? If so, how did it differ?
My basic load of ammo and frag grenades pretty much stayed the same. What would differ were the types of mission, not necessarily recon or hatchet force, but if you were going in, say, on a snatch, we would go in heavy with claymores and det cord and things like that. because that was going to be required by the mission. With if you knew you were going in on a, say, a trail watch or a wiretap, you might not have quite as many extra claymores with you. You would just take what we considered your basic loadout. Sometimes it would be extra batteries just for radios. So I hope that answered the question, but
yes, sir. And since we're on, and I think it's gonna come up. Like I said, these questions are coming in so quick. Could you give us a little rundown on what your preferred gear was? What kind of weapon you were using, and how much ammo, and like you said, you were carrying?
I carried a Car 15 all the time. I obviously had access to everything from M64 Bravos to the Swedish Ks, Mark II Sten guns, all the silent stuff, AKs, basically whatever you wanted to carry. But I kind of wanted everybody to be able to have crossloads of ammunition, so everything was the same. So anytime we went out, we had M16s and Car 15s. That was it. We had a 79 gunner who had 40 rounds, 40 millimeter rounds, and I carried normally around 36 magazines in my vest, my LBE, and in my rucksack. And then I would have 6 frag grenades on my web gear and in my rucksack, and I would also have a claymore in a bag with time fuse around my neck, and then I would have more claymores in my rucksack. And something else that I did, I always carried the radio. I didn't have anybody else carry a radio, but I always had, plus my survival radio. I found out on the first mission with Smitty that you don't want to be trying to find a handset to talk into that someone else has. You want to have it yourself.
Wow. Yeah. There's
my rucksack and my LBE would push somewhere around 70, 75 pounds.
God almighty. Mr. Terry Kadenbach has joined the chat, and he's curious about any contact with Russian or Chinese.
The only contact that I personally had was on an HF operation with out of MAI. We went in to hit a way station that a recon team had found, and while we were doing the leader's recon, Buck Buchanan and Kerry Garland had their HF with us also, and the three of us were observing the target from the high ground on the other side of the river from this way station. And while we were watching it, 2 Caucasians came from the way station and got into the river and basically took a bath. And so that obviously upped our intensity level to make sure we got to the way station as quickly as possible. And we basically moved all our elements down the hill, across the river, and we hit the way station at dawn. But unfortunately, there were no Caucasians in there at the time. We wound up with like 13 detainees, and they weren't really POWs; they were detainees because they were forced labor. The Vietnamese were using it to work around the way station.
Wow. And that there's going to be another question come up about these, and you can just verify. Yep, you pretty much heard it there. I've heard some SOG members spotting Russian troops and information. If it's true, Russians were there. Yeah, you can hear that from Mr. Vern.
Well, I don't know. To be perfectly honest with you, I have no idea what nationality the Caucasians were, but they were definitely Caucasians. And, we never heard them obviously speak to one another, so we don't know. After the war was over with, a lot of intelligence was gleaned from other sources that said yes, the Soviets, other Eastern Bloc countries, the Chinese, all had troops on the ground. A lot of the SAM sites, I think, were initially manned by actual Soviet crews in North Vietnam. Mm-hmm. So there were quite a few of our adversaries fighting their part in the proxy war against us in Southeast Asia.
Wow, I'm reading a gunship book about Spectre supporting y'all and its complete history, and they're talking about the initial setup of the SA-2s were strictly manned by Russian advisors at all times. So they were most certainly there, and like Vern said, they'd run into them, running recon as well. So they weren't just in the advisor role, shooting SAMs, so to speak. Messed that up. What was the largest amount of men you went across the border with, and what was the smallest amount?
The smallest amount was 6, and the largest amount was the operation I was just talking about, the raid on the way station, because we actually took 3 of our, basically they were reinforced platoons of 3 HS in on that operation.
Wow. Okay, that's what I thought. That's a lot of men right there. Here's another Hatchet Force one. Unsure if this question's already been asked before, but how loud was the average Hatchet Force operation, especially compared to your recon operations?
How loud?
Yes, sir. I can imagine.
You increase the number of troops on the ground, you increase the amount of noise that you're making. It's a whole lot harder to be clandestine with 50 guys than it is with 6 or 7.
Absolutely.
And kind of my mindset on a recon mission was we want to go with as few people as we can.
Yeah, and like Terry has said in his episodes, the Hatchet Forces were going out to get into trouble, and like Vern said, the recon guys aren't looking for it. They're trying to get info and intel to again get back home safe. Here's an interesting from Jason. Who were your best friends while you were over there?
Actually, several of them were the same best friends I had when I got before I ever got there. But I had several guys that I was pretty tight with, and in all of the places. So.
Let's see here. Sorry guys, this is a rough one. Besides not having pictures to show, this these questions are hard to get into. Here we go. Besides being in a major combat zone while out on a mission middle of the night, was it ever peaceful? Were you ever able to take in the beautiful views of Vietnam or any scenery?
That wasn't really the feeling that you had at the time. Looking back, it was a fantastic country. I mean, it still is, but that really wasn't part of your mindset at the time about the beauty of the countryside.
Let's see. And yeah, looking back at all these photos, I can imagine now you're saying, "Wow, it really was beautiful." But in the heat of the moment, it's a daunting place, I can imagine.
Yep.
What was the craziest, strangest thing that ever happened to you while out on a mission?
I
That'd be a tough one.
think about that a while. Uh,
I mean, crossing, which I hope you'll be okay to get into. I would say one of the craziest things ever would be going into North Vietnam. That's pretty crazy.
well, yeah, that was a fairly crazy mission. It got crazy toward the end, so that might be it.
That was and we'll get into some of these. Let's see, guys. Sorry, talking about some of the African American recon men. Oh, here we go. That's a good one. How well did your stateside training and in-country training prepare you for the actual operations you were tasked with once you got to SOG?
It gave you a basic understanding and a basic knowledge, basic patrolling techniques or basic patrolling techniques, and you also you define those much more precisely. Obviously, whenever you're actually doing combat operation, you develop idiosyncrasies that everybody's SOP is slightly different, but for the most part, you were fairly well versed in the basics when you got there. Yes, but there was nothing that could prepare you for that first on the ground mission.
Speaking of training, let me get that. Did you was the combat orientation course going on? What was your in-country training like? Was that the COC course or?
When I got to fifth group, we had an orientation course, and then I went straight there to Da Nang and then processed, and then was on my way to Khe Sanh.
Woo! Wow. This Roddy Patterson is the son of a Khartoum veteran. Is Mr. Ward a career SFer?
Yes.
Yes.
32 years.
And I actually just remembered I skipped over his last question. By chance, did you have any TDYs to Okinawa in your career?
I never did.
Never did. Okay.
Never.
Wow. Let's see here. Questions are still coming in a bit. I've actually got an interesting question. If you wouldn't mind covering a little bit, would you mind telling the folks a little bit about your amazing job that you were tasked with during the Marine operation of Operation Dewey Canyon?
Yeah, I was actually with the Ninth Marines at the very beginning of the operation. I had been wounded toward the end of the year, still in recovery, and I was tasked by Major Sincere and Colonel Barr to effect contact with the 9th Marine people, because we were going to have teams on the ground, obviously, to their west, and I was going to maintain contact between the radio relay, the teams, and pass any pertinent information on to their command element. That was in mid-January, and I went in with the 9th Marines, and they established their headquarters there at one of their fire bases, and we basically, I just was there with the Marines passing information until we extracted the teams that were on the ground at the time, and then I was pulled out after about 10 or 12 days. I understand that later in that operation that several other teams and actually a hatchet force were inserted. So that was my experience in Dewey Canyon.
Wow. And I mean, a lot of people don't know it. I mean, that was a heck of an operation, and I'm sure. I mean, I didn't know it until you told me that, you know, I knew there were hatchet forces in the area, but I didn't know there were any attached to the 9th Marines, and that's just
none of them were attached. The 9th Marines had no idea who was actually there. All the information that we passed to conventional forces through ensigns and any of the intel reports was always listed as a friendly guerrilla unit. And obviously, because of the classification, I didn't tell them, look, I got teams on the ground that are west of you. I was just passing intel to them in real time. So when a team found something, saw something, heard something that was pertinent, it was passed straight to their command group. And other than the command group, you know, the average snuffy Marine in the foxhole out there on the perimeter had no idea who, what, or why I was. You know, I was just that guy that was wandering around in these sterile jungle fatigues with a do-rag on his head. So, and black jacket and the helmets, and
I can only imagine what some of those young Marines were thinking. Who in the heck is this guy, and what is he doing?
Well, I did put on a cap.
Okay.
Quite as conspicuous.
Let's see. Oh, somebody's got a question about your awards. Are those German Army jump wings in the shadow box behind you?
Yes.
Wow. Good eye. Wow. Okay. Let's see. Oh, Jason's got an interesting one. Did you ever get a POW? If so, did you get to go on your R&R? Or where did you go on your R&R?
We actually did get 3 POWs on an operation, and never got an R&R out of it.
Oh. And that's one heck of a story. Is that's not the mirror mission now, is it? That's the one after the mirror mission, isn't it?
No, this happened prior to the operation that Lockshire was talking about with the mirrors.
Okay.
We were tasked to conduct an operation that was, even when I said earlier, even some of the operations within SOG were not common knowledge. As that bombing halt was going into effect, and they had declared that, you know, we were no longer going to be bombing north of the DMZ. They tasked us with a mission to try to do a prisoner snatch on the other side of the DMZ in North Vietnam. Well, in order to conduct that mission, we had to get literally presidential approval, because he was the one that ordered the bombing halt, for us to have TAC air to support the mission. And I wound up taking two of the NCOs that were the two that were with me were unfortunately two of the ones who were killed in the King Beach crash less than a month later. But it was Richard Fitz and Art Bader, and took 4 of our yards, and we inserted into North Vietnam, a fairly routine insertion. Moved into an RON. Next day, we moved out to do a recon for a snatch site. The site we originally thought we could do it in turned out not to be suitable, so we found another site, set up an ORP, set out all the extra claymores in the ORP, set up the actual snatch site with the base demolition ambush with dead center and claymores opposing each other, and had not been in position all that long whenever we got the signal that we had traffic coming down the trail. And 4 of them entered the kill zone, triggered the ambush. One of them was severely, mortally injured. The other 3 were not as seriously injured. We secured them, withdrew back up into the ORP. We came under fire almost immediately after we initiated the snatch. So we're in contact this whole time. We pulled up to the ORP, and they hit us in the ORP. We beat them off with claymores and frag grenades, which was one of the things we tried to push all the time was a last resort. You fire your weapon. If you can have a mass casualty producing device that does not fixate a position, that's much, much more desirable than firing your weapon, because once you fire your weapon, they pinpointed you. Whereas that claymore is an area weapon, and it's hard to tell where frags come from. So the first time they hit us, we beat them off with the claymores and frags. They hit us again a short time later. We beat them off again with the claymore, the other claymores and the frags. And at that time, Pat Watkins, who was overhead as a covey, told us that our primary and our alternate PZ for exfil was compromised, and they were looking for another place to try to get us out. They came back and said they had a bomb crater about 500 meters along the ridge we were already on top of, and we started trying to fight our way, basically a retrograde under fire. We were using helicopter gunships, would come in and make the gun runs. I'd throw out a panel, they'd make the gun run while they were firing. We would pull back as far as we could. And when they would roll out, we would reestablish some kind of a little position there to try to keep them off our tails a little bit. And we did that all the way back to the PZ. Bader and Fitz basically imposed their will upon the 3 POWs all the way to the PZ. They were kind of carried, kind of drugged, and kind of staggering. We got to this bomb crater. They couldn't land all the way, so we had one Sioux that I'd been dragging to the PZ. We had lifted him up and Dick Crawford was chase medic. He pulled him in the chopper. He wound up getting everybody in, to include the 3 POWs. And as I went to board, 5 more of the NVA came up, and I had already redistributed ammo during this running firefight we had along this ridge line, to the point where I had 1 magazine of ammunition left, and I emptied it into the 5 that were running toward the bomb crater, and then they pulled me up in the helicopter, and we started lifting out, and one of the POWs decided he was going to leave the helicopter and tried to do it over the top of me, and I just pulled my Air Force survival knife that I had in my web gear, and it has a kind of a blunt end on the end of it, like a large bolt. And I hit him in the back of the head, and he convinced him to stay in the helicopter. And we wound up getting back across, and General Stilwell, who was the I Field Force Victor commander, was actually there the entire time the mission was going on, because of the sensitivity of it. And they kind of scooped the 3 guys, and the next thing we know, they're all gone. And it was never to be pushed again. So, and I was medevac because I had gotten hit about 3 times during this movement. So
that's I mean, that is unbelievable of a mission, and especially having Mr. Fitz and Bader, who sadly would lose their lives a little bit later. I can't remember, isn't that the same mission me and you spoke about at lunch, to where you actually drew out y'all's egress plan on the napkin?
it's possible.
I believe it is, and that's a cherished piece of item, because all the way you can tell to where y'all are blowing claymores and the whole 9. I mean, that story right there is unbelievable. And like you said, even General Stilwell is there listening in the entire time, making sure it's going well.
Well, he was there obviously because of the sensitivity of the mission, because we obviously were violating that bombing halt, and that's what caused the sensitivity, and it pretty well was just dropped after that.
I mean, that's to get presidential, have to get presidential authority like that. I mean, that's one of the big ones right there. That's a wild one. Wow. Um, did you happen to get any war trophies or any guns or anything you were able to bring home, or?
No, that really wasn't very high on my list of things to do at the time on any operation.
Roddy's wanting to know, were you in DET-A?
No, I was never in DET-A. I was attached to DET-A for a period of time, but I was never assigned to DET-A.
Okay. His father went from Khartoum to also being in DET-A.
There were quite a few guys went to DET-A out of CNC.
He's always looking out for. We're gonna have a DET-A guy on that hopefully remembers him. He's always trying to get some info on his father. Yes, I agree. It should not have taken 45 years to award Mr. Ward his Silver Star, but better late than never, as they say.
Well, there were numerous awards that were delayed, primarily because of the classification and probably the sensitivity of what was going on. For example, the one we just talked about, that and guys weren't there for awards anyway.
Mm-hmm.
That's,
Oh,
that's why you were there. You were there to do the mission.
Numerous men have spoken about turning down awards, or not even worrying about it, especially Purple Hearts, because it gets you field. Yeah, that a lot of y'all could have cared less about any of that. That's one thing that
I think the average number of Purple Hearts for us during the duration was 3, at least 3 per man. So,
jeez. And then you got the outliers like Bob Howard and some of the others with 7, 8, 9, stuff like that. Just amazing. Yeah, it's I was wondering, besides running some missions with Mr. Terry while you were in Vietnam, you also have a pretty interesting story that I didn't learn about till recently about after Vietnam. Not to get us completely out, but you actually ended up working for Mr. Dick Meadows and working with Mr. Dick Thompson, correct?
Well, actually, all 3 of us, when we left there, were assigned to the Ranger Department. Dick and Dick were both at CCN when I at Da Nang, when I was at Khe Sanh and at MAI, and then I went to CCC to Kontum after we closed MAI and everything shut down there. Matter of fact, Major Sincere, there were several of us who went to Kontum. But yeah, then Dick and I were together in the Ranger Department, and Dick Thompson was at the Mountain Ranger camp whenever we were at Benning.
Okay, wow. And you did you say you were at the desert, or he was one of y'all were standing something up, weren't y'all? One of the new phases for Ranger School?
Oh yeah. Colonel Gerasi, who was the department director, this was a period of time where terrorists were hijacking airliners and landing in the desert. And it was during one of those episodes he came in and said, we started looking, and the latest desert manual we have was World War II. And he said, and we have absolutely nothing about how we would take care of a scenario like this. And so he said, I want you all to look and see if you can develop a desert phase for Ranger training. And so we set about looking for places and developing a POI, and then we actually we formed a little provisional Ranger company, and then I took the Ranger company through the first iteration of the actual desert phase of Ranger training, which we conducted at Fort Bliss. It was later adopted and part of Ranger training, and then it was dropped due to cost concerns after a period of time, so it no longer exists in the POI. But Dick Meadows and I were tasked with that.
Wow. And this is and this was, like you said, this was right around the time of the Sante thing.
We did this in early 71.
Okay. Wow. A lot of, you definitely got an interesting history, and we've got it's amazing the stuff that you were in post Vietnam as well. And actually, here's an interesting question, considering he asked about this earlier, and he's asked us time or two. Since you have the jump wings, what was your experience like with the Germans?
We actually got those wings when we were attached to DET-A, doing some other operations. So that's where that came from. Some of the other wings were a little bit more exciting, shall we say.
It's looking through some of our older notes, and people are always asking about the legacy of SOG and how much y'all created all of this. How DevGru has development group, and Delta is always testing out equipment and everything. And I always found it interesting when we speak about some of your later career, about how some of the SOG air tactics and using to call in airstrikes, specifically like in Somalia, and working on stuff at Hurlburton Field, which was absolutely interesting to hear about, and how much SOG still was playing that much of a role even then.
Well, I was assigned as the SF liaison officer to the Air Force Special Operations element at Hurlburt, and during that time, we developed a training program where we were bringing all the 8 attachments and SEAL teams in and doing live fire integrated exercises, doing live fire force entry, live fire support, and then live fire extraction with live fire ADs, and lots of cover there. And we worked the gunships nearly every night with myself and the 3 SF NCOs and 1 SEAL that I had. And whenever the Adid group ambushed the Pakistani convoy in June of '93, we were alerted, and the AC-130 commander said he wanted me to bring my guys, and we would be on the ground in Mogadishu, because we obviously worked with the gunships nearly every night and had the most experience with them. And my experience in Vietnam with the gunship was the first experience with an AC-130 was actually the night that Terry Kadenbach got hit, because after he was medevac, we got hit that night, and I worked the A1Es and the AC-130 around us all night, because I had the only working radio after the initial incoming. So we went into Somalia. We flew from Hurlburt to Djibouti nonstop. Went into Mogadishu, and we had purchased off the civilian market a little thing called an LPL-30, which we were working with the gunships to use as a laser designator, because at the time the laser target designator that the Army had was a really bulky and not really suitable for you to have at our level and carry around. So we purchased this tiny little device, smaller than a cell phone, that worked off AA batteries, that we could actually paint a target with the laser at 3,000 meters.
Ooh.
And it wasn't government issue equipment. Like I said, we bought it off the open market, and we had been working that with the gunships for about a year. And that was that, and since we probably had the only working old T-mags that the gunships used as a beacon to fix friendly locations and do offset shoots, we employed that in Mogadishu in June of '93, whenever we did all the punitive strikes against the DET.
Ooh.
That was strictly strictly an ad hoc SF/1 SEAL mission that went on the entire time we were on target, which was like 3 weeks doing strikes in Mogadishu.
Wow, man. And in my notes, with your 10th group experience, did you did your A team end up getting a downed pilot as well?
Now, and I wasn't with 10th group. I was still the SF liaison officer to the Air Force. But for anytime there was any type of deployment of AFSOC assets that were going to, obviously it was going to involve SF, and I would deploy in the lead element to do the coordination to make sure that we had the right support in the right places. But yeah, the A teams were on every one of the personnel recovery CH-53s that were coming out of Brindisi, supporting all the operations going into to Bosnia and Kosovo. So there was an A team on the 53 that actually picked up the F-117 pilot.
Wow, that is
we did we did that nonstop in Iraq. We were in Kuwait doing the same thing with A teams on the recovery birds.
Man, I mean, so y'all were even after SOG, the bright lights really never stopped for you, so to speak.
Well, no, I mean it was just kind of a continuation of what we already knew worked.
Absolutely. Wow. We're this next question, we're gonna kind of jump back in time. He had to step away for work, but did you carry a pistol on any operations or on missions, I should say?
No.
No side.
Extra weight.
Extra weight.
Unless you're gonna get into a fist fight with somebody, combat's not really the place that you're gonna have a lot of pistol marksmanship.
I've heard that. Instead of putting weight for the sidearm and its ammo, but why not add an extra magazine or something?
Yeah, I just now when we weren't on an operation, you carried pistols, but not on an operation. I did. So some guys did. I didn't. I just didn't think that the extra bulk and weight was worth it.
I can understand that. What sidearm did you use when you weren't on the field, just around town or around the compound?
High powers.
Oh wow, great Browning high power. Always love hearing when y'all are using those. Roddy wants to know, what year were you attached with DET-A?
72 or 73.
I'll see if we can look into that some more. Oh wow, there's quite a few questions coming in. Let's see. Jason had another one. Did you ever acquire anything with SOG? We heard a lot about scrounging, maybe a Jeep, any weapons that were needed, anything like that.
Let's just say that when we were at MAI that we were able to conduct some resupply various things and acquisition of certain things. We found, like at Khe Sanh, that a bottle of whiskey could get us nearly anything a Marine had. So same thing applied in Quang Tri. We run the road to Quang Tri from MAI, and if you got a bottle of whiskey to the right people, you could pretty well feed everybody pretty well for a couple of weeks. The Marines
Wow.
have access to the booze, and we obviously had some ways to get it.
Did Roger mentioned something about y'all's cook at MyLock? Did y'all have a Chinese or some kind of a cook?
Later, yeah. Once we got out of Pancho Hooch's, when we left Khe Sanh and went into MyLock, they dropped us at the end of a dirt strip, and that's what was there, a dirt strip. A101, the team that was overrun at Long Bay, was reconstituting on the south end of that airstrip, and they were building their A camp there. And we basically were on the north end of the airstrip. And when we got off the helicopter, what we had was what we had. So we started digging holes and eventually got some concertina all the way around the perimeter and had some hasty fighting positions, and then got sandbag bunkers, and it was a real move up. Some pictures you have, you see some of the hooches some of us had. Basically, they were poncho hooches, and that's pretty much what we.
Oh no! Jeez, I keep doing that. And guys, like I said, on this phone issue, I apologize. I'm buying a new computer, and if Mr. Vern will be so gracious, we're going to end up having him back. We've got questions. I'm not ending just yet, but a lot of these photos he's speaking about, he's sent me, and I'm not able to show them because some of these are perfect photos to show y'all how exactly rough MyLock was for these guys to be living in this and then expected to go out in the boonies and work as hard as they did, because it was literal tent city. I mean, like you said, it
the tents were a step up. We only had like 2 tents. There were 2 GP mediums. One was the ops center, and one had some racks in it.
Woo. That's rough.
Some of the guys like Bob Donahue and Buck Buchanan and Kara and all those guys were still like with their HF, with their indig, living in poncho condos.
Gosh, holy cow! I mean, you MyLock guys got a special bond among you for like Khe Sanh go living what y'all lived through.
Well, and then on the other side of the strip, they started building the actual camp, and guys, they would pull guys in like Troll. Troll was a carpenter by trade, so when Troll wasn't deployed, they'd ship him from Fubai to MyLock to help build the plywood camp. Yeah. That's how the camp got put up.
Wow.
Putting the minefield and stuff in around the camp is how Gary Madsen was killed.
Tragic story. Tragic. Wow. Man, I had no idea. The troll, Mr. Sternberg.
Troll put together 2/3 of the buildings that were at MyLock.
That is unbelievable. I knew from SOAR. I finally saw some of his woodworking, and as a matter of fact, his daughter is in college doing woodwork, becoming an artist, and she made a SOG wood. I don't even what to call it. What have you? I'll post a picture of it. But she evidently that carpentry runs in the Sternberg genes, because it's amazing work.
Well, he, there, like I said, a lot of guys would be just come into MyLock for 4 or 5 days, and they were wielding hammers and saws, and that's how the plywood buildings got put up.
Wow. That's I did not know that, and that's a great little tidbit of history to know the troll's hand built my lock up pretty much. That's very interesting.
He was one of them singing a hammer and probably knew more about what he was doing than most of the other of us.
That's great. I'll have to talk to him about that next time we speak. How did a individual determine the gear required for a mission, i.e., how much ammo would generally be brought, quarts of water, meals, or aircraft used to resupply y'all in the field?
No. Resupplies would compromise your location. You like I said, you determined you have a basic thing that you carry all the time, and then you can up the number of frags, the number of claymores, or even the amount of ammo you carry. Water was pretty standard. I think most guys would have at least 3 quarts, because you'd have a 2 quart with a rucksack, and then you'd have a 1 quart somewhere on your LBE. Meals. Meals primarily for me consisted of mixing a PIR, a provisional indigenous ration, in a battery bag, one of the plastic bags from a Prick 25 battery. You mix up a PIR in there with all the rice, and you put a rubber band on it, and you put it in your cargo pocket. If you decided, I think I'll need something to eat, you take it out and put a mouthful in and put it back in your pocket.
Is that
time it came full?
Were the PIRs? Those are the ones that they almost look, I think, like the boil in a bag rice is now, to where is that the one, like you said, you could just mix it up, add water, put it in your pocket, body heat
water in it. It had things like mutton and squid, and
yes.
Make sure you got something that didn't have much odor to it.
Oh yeah, I can only imagine. I've heard some horror stories of guys that had to be told you couldn't be bringing hot sauce in the field because of how pungent it was, and them passing gas was just absolutely terrible. So they had to be banished from hot sauce in the field.
Yep. Well, the little peppers, the little Thai peppers that grew wild on the bushes, those were probably the only sure cure for amoebic dysentery in all of Southeast Asia, because the acidity level was so high that it would destroy the amoebic dysentery.
Wow, I did not know that or even think about that. Wow. And those are growing just wild out there.
Past one, you'd have to beat the yards because they wanted to strip them all off.
Wow, I had no idea about that. Wow. Here we go. That's an interesting one. If I can pull it up. Oh, there it is. Sorry about that. Aside from the obvious changes make based on locations, were tactics used pretty consistent when running recon?
Immediate action drill, yes. J-hooking into any kind of an RON or any kind of an ORP, we always J-hooked. You know what I'm talking about with the J-hook?
Mm-hmm.
We always J-hooked into that. We had our own little set of hand and arm signals that was, everybody was fairly cognizant of on the operation. I think the IEDs were fairly common between teams, because just about everybody used to peel. So, like I said, I used to carry a claymore with a time fuse just in a bag around my neck, and that was part of our ID. Was but after you and the point man expend and peel, then that claymore went down, and as guys came past you, you just pull that fuse igniter and go. But I used to always like to use white phosphorus grenades in front of the claymores. You would bend the handle back to let it just sit over the face of the claymore, and it made the claymore much more effective. And had the psychological effect of helping to slow down some of your pursuit.
Wow. Yeah, that a Willie Peter in front of that claymore. Oh, I can't even imagine that.
Yep.
What was your preferred method of extracting from a mission? I've heard there were multiple ways. What was your preferred?
Whichever way we could. First way is to board an aircraft and fly out, but sometimes that's not possible. Sometimes you had to come out on strings. Sometimes, ladders. Some guys would have ladders. The problem with the ladder is you don't climb that ladder. You go up the side of it and go 2 or 3 links, and you just snap link into it because you're not. I never would have tried to climb that ladder, and I know the yards couldn't have climbed that. But if we never came out, but the deal was the yards knew that if we got ladders, that we were going to snap in.
Yeah, I and thank God for those snaps too, because I can only imagine the first couple teams. I hope they knew to take snaps, because that would be a long time holding on to that ladder.
You couldn't do it. Originally, what we had, we didn't have McGuire rigs and Stabo and all of this stuff. What we had was a rappel seat and 120-foot climbing rope with double butterflies in the end that were kicked out, and you just had a rappel seat on, and you snap linked into that double butterfly. But you had on the ropes, it would be a double butterfly, and then up about 6 feet, there would be another double butterfly. And they would kick 4 ropes out, and you could put 8 people on that. So you try to snap your yards in up above you, and you snap in the bottom, because half the time the yards would get all squirrely, and you'd have to hold one up, flip upside down, because he would let go.
Woo. That is, oh man, that some of those y'all's string extractions or McGuire rigs or Swiss seats, those extractions are just terrifying to hear about. Not sure if this was asked, but what was Mr. Ward's longest mission over the fence?
The longest time on the ground was when we saw the 2 Caucasians, because after we hit that way station, we kind of moved to an established a defensive position on top of this hill, and we started running patrols out of there every day and just kind of daring them to come get us. And we stayed on the ground in that for 8 or 9 days. On the ground when we hit the way station, we'd already been on the ground. That was our 3rd morning, and we stayed 5 more days after that. We had nothing but sporadic contact.
Wow, that's a long time out there, especially with sporadic. Wow.
Finally, they just made the decision to pull us out. So
That's an interesting question. Did it take you long to trust your yards, or did you click with them and connect a relationship early on?
No, it took no time to establish rapport with the yards. I mean, they were that you paid them, you led them, and every time they went across the fence, they got extra money.
Wow.
We were kind of providing security for the village too. So
Yeah, and like most guys say, and if you've read the books and everything, as long as you didn't go in there acting like a complete turd and treating them that they had no reason not to trust you, considering their
right.
connections with other SF dogmen.
Well, see, like at Pontoon at the where I was, they had their families inside the wire, so their families were right there.
Wow. So that's every incentive to build the bonds and make sure everything's on the up and up, is with your family being right there and
Yep.
have to protect them. We're down to the last few. We're coming up on almost an hour and 45 minutes here. Did you sleep in a hammock or on the ground with the creepy crawlers during the RONs?
What sleep you did get, it was on the ground. There's no hammocks. There's ponchos make noise. There were no poncho liners or anything else. We just pretty much where you went down against your rucksack. That's pretty much where you were.
Were your teams during the RONs? Did y'all have a particular percentage security at all times, or?
Yeah. Yep.
What was y'all's?
One of the Americans always.
Yeah, I hear stories of some of these teams or some of these guys talking about that all of them would sleep for a period of time, and that seems a little scary to do that, to have everyone resting, so to speak.
Well, whoever was definitely awake during that period was laser focused on that straight line and that J hook, because if you were getting tracked, that was the whole point of that J hook, was to make sure that they were all in enfilade to you.
Wow, man. We're kind of slowing down here, and I've got of course, using a phone, it eats up battery. I was gonna see Vern, if when I get this computer back up and going, I was hoping we could maybe have you back to where I could actually show some photos off of you and my lock and all of that, if you'd be open to that.
Okay.
Okay. Well, is there we're going to probably cut a bit short today. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we shut it down for the day?
No, I just appreciate you trying to make sure that this history stays alive. I think because we didn't exist for so many years, it's kind of hard now for people to really understand what went on during that time period. So,
Yes, sir. That means the world. That's really why I've started doing this, not only to get y'all's names out there, but for families that didn't know what y'all have done, or families of fallen SOG veterans, to be able to watch this and at least know what their family members were doing. So
right.
It's just an honor to know you and meet you finally, and be able to do this interview today with you.
Well, I appreciate it.
We and all of the viewers are saying thank you, and can't wait to have you back. Thank you for your service, and definitely we're gonna want to have you back when I get my all these technical issues out of the way, which I apologize for the day.
No problem. Look forward to it.
Yes, sir. And I will stay in touch with you, and everyone's saying goodbye and thank you. I'll pass these along to Mr. Vern whenever we get off. But I'm about to shut it down for the day. You can just hit the little leave studio or end button, and that'll take care of it.
All right.
See you later.
All right.
Bye. All righty. Wow, that was wonderful, guys. I apologize about the computer issue, man, and us not being able to have photos, but better than nothing. So it looks like God forbid we have tomorrow with James again have some issues. I'll use the phone and we'll do that. But maybe I at least get 1 or 2 days that it's working. So hopefully we can get it to work tomorrow. So if not, we'll at least have it on here. I will update y'all. Y'all did awesome. It's I've got some good links. I'll post on there. Some good force recon and stuff too. Yeah, guys, y'all really killed it today with the questions. Really, really great stuff. Sorry again for the phone. Having to scroll through these is very strange. The buttons are weird, making it solo for him, but I hope it worked out well. I think it went pretty good. Mr. Vern really didn't know what to expect, so some of the stories he didn't go into as much detail, but I still think we got some good stuff today. And with him coming back, I think he'll know what to expect, and he'll get a little deeper in since he knows what's going on, and we've got a serious crowd here. So you guys did awesome. Jason, Jim McKay, Otto, Infantry, Brady, Daniel, as usual, you guys are just knocking it out of the park. Thank y'all. It's taken off. I mean, heck, we're about to be at 1,100 subscribers, so I'll keep y'all up to date. And actually, Dave Maurer called while we were doing this, and I had to end it real quick. That's why my screen went blank early on. So I got to call him and see what's up. So be ready for him Friday, and we've got Gordon Kookaloo Thursday. Hopefully James tomorrow, but definitely going to have Gordon and Dave Maurer, permitting no phone issues, because God, if I have to use the phone for Dave, we're going to be in big trouble. But I'll get with y'all after in a bit and let y'all know what's going on.